I've already covered the new 151 decks that will win you games consistently. Now it's time to focus on the 151 decks that will work 10% of the time, but you'll have fun playing. Just like before, I'll include lists for all of these decks in the description, so you can easily copy and paste them into live when 151 releases on Thursday at 10 AM Pacific, 1 PM Eastern. Let's kick things off with the Pokemon from 151 who can deal 400 damage unreliably, Kangaskhan EX. As new cards are being revealed for Paradox Rift, our November set, it seems like Big Basics will be a better choice over Evolution decks. That makes Kangaskhan EX a great candidate going forward. While it desperately wants some sort of reflipping card to be printed in Standard, Kangaskhan flips 4 coins and does 100 damage for each heads. If you're lucky, you can be doing 300 damage per turn, knocking out a lot of things in Standard. If you're unlucky, you'll be throwing your phone against a wall. There's honestly plenty of ways to play Kangaskhan EX. The most boring is using a Mirage Gate build because that'll probably work the best. But we want to have fun while playing Pokemon cards. We don't want to use flower selecting for the 100th time in the last hour. All the cool people will be playing a version of Kangaskhan like this. It has 4 Kangaskhan and 4 Energy Seal, meaning you're flipping so many coins there's no way you can possibly lose. The strategy of this one is easy. Get basic energy into the discard pile with Radiant Greninja and Cycling Road, then accelerate it into play with Energy Seal, which is guaranteed to work at least twice every game if I did my math correctly. Then pray for heads. This version uses Mew EX to continually draw cards, so having plenty of items is a good idea. For those of you who are risk averse, you can just chuck a Kangaskhan or 2 into Lugia V-Star and have it as your do or die attacker. Or you could be even crazier and include a copy of Miraidon Flaffy. Whatever makes your boss stiff. However you decide to play Kangaskhan EX, Bravery Charm is a must, and Dunsparce is something to think about. Don't forget that it can also be used with Penny to buy yourself extra time, so long as you have a way to re-accelerate the energy. But let's be honest, you're either going to flip a lot of heads and win, or flip a lot of tails and lose. That is the way of the kangaroo. If you're still craving coin flip cards, I've got a great one for you, Machamp. The ability is the exact same as Harry Mama's from Fusion Strike. If this Pokemon will be knocked out by damage from an attack, flip a coin. If heads, this Pokemon is not knocked out and its remaining HP becomes 10. Obviously, the main difference is that Machamp is a stage 2, making it harder to set up. On the plus side, both Machop and Machoke MEW discard at least 1 card from the top of your opponent's deck. And Machoke and Machamp have access to Reversal Energy, which will almost always be activated since you're not going to be taking very many prizes. Your best course of action is buying yourself as much time as possible to set up Machamp. I recommend 1 copy of Mimikyu and 2 copies of Klefki. Mimikyu is immune to damage from V and EX Pokemon, while Klefki shuts off all basic Pokemon abilities. These give you a chance to have a turn where your opponent isn't attacking. Then just worry about evolving your Machop as quickly as possible. Because you rely so heavily on the ability, the coin flip is going to be all that matters. Flip heads enough, you win. Flip tails 3 turns in a row, you lose. It's basically Ambipom with the added benefit of milling your opponent a little bit. There isn't much to change with Machamp, though you could add the Crisis Muscles Machamp to give yourself a late game 300 hit point attacker. And when Paradox Rift launches in November, we're getting Gorgeous Mantle, which would give Machamp 280 hit points at the cost of providing 2 prize cards instead of 1. Sticking with the wacky decks, we have Jynx EX and Hypno. If you watch my crafting guide for 151, you know Jynx gets outclassed in November with Roaring Moon. But that doesn't mean we can't have fun in the month and a half before that. Jynx's first attack, Heart-Stopping Kiss, knocks out your opponent's active Pokemon if it's asleep. When you evolve Drowsy into the new Hypno, you put your opponent's active Pokemon to sleep. Could I make it any more obvious? Since Jynx EX attacks for a water and 2 colorless, you could go with the risky Energy Seal strategy, throwing in an experience share or 2 for good measure. However, because there's no easy way to put Hypno back into your hand, you'll likely be using Jynx's attack twice at most in every game. So pairing it with Palkia V-Star is the best thing, as it's a backup attacker who also accelerates energy to Jynx. For those who are well versed in water decks, Jynx Hypno will feel familiar. Use Irida to get yourself an item and a water Pokemon on turn 1, then use Palkia to accelerate energy on turn 2 if you can. Bench space will be at a premium here though, so keep in mind that you'll really only ever want 1 Palkia and 1 Beedrill on the field at a time, especially if you have to put Manaphy and Radiant Greninja down. The main issue with Dewdong Swim Freely is that you shuffle the energy back into your deck after each attack, making it super difficult to find the following turn. You basically have to have two Beedrill in play and hope you only draw into energy to loop attacks. But with Seaking, you can use superior energy retrieval and reversal energy to make your life a lot easier. Seaking does 60 damage plus 30 more for each water energy attached to it. So if you have 8 energy attached, it's dealing 300 damage. Reversal energy can provide 3 of those, and superior energy retrieval can get back 4, so unlike Dewdong, you're not scrambling like an Execute to piece together a knockout. If I had to guess, I'd say this will be better than the Dewdong version, which isn't saying much. While deck space is tight in Seaking, you may want to put a copy or two of Vitality Band, as hitting 280 is a lot better than hitting 270. Zoroark is easily my favorite deck that just never seems to put it together when you need it to. For 151, the new additions worth looking at are Raichu, Aerodactyl, and Flareon. Raichu does 180 damage for a reversal energy, and is an added benefit if one of your Pokemon with the reversal energy attached is knocked out, Raichu gets it. Obviously, you'll have to preemptively get Raichu into play and be behind on prizes, but it appears to be the best lightning type attacker for Zoroark right now. Aerodactyl, meanwhile, will do 80 damage with De-Evolution Ray with a double turbo energy attached. This attack is perfect for trolling people using evolved EX Pokemon, as the attack devolves your opponent's active and puts the highest stage evolution into their hand. For example, let's say you hit a Charizard EX that was rare candied from a Charmander. The Charizard EX will go back into their hand, while the Charmander underneath will take 80 damage and be knocked out. You're still probably better off using Scovillain against Charizard EX to take big one-hit KOs, but De-Evolution Ray is definitely nice to have access to. Finally, there's Flareon. All 3 of the evolutions in 151 have the same attack. For a reversal energy, they do 90 damage plus 90 more if your opponent's active is an EX or a V. While there's no reason to play Jolteon since Raichu is better, and there's no reason to play Vaporeon because Titan is better, Flareon appears to be the best fire-type attacker, dealing 180 damage for reversal energy with no drawbacks. Also, while it's not a new card, Bellibolt from Obsidian Flames is immune to damage from lightning Pokemon. With Miraidon becoming more popular with each passing day, chuck it in your deck and laugh at your opponent while jumping up and down and telling them a good player can play a bad hand well. I'll include a list for Zoroark in the description, but the deck is still largely the same as it's always been. If you face multi-prize decks and have a good start, your chances of winning are high. If you have a bad start, your chances of winning are low. It's wonderfully infuriating. When I first read Golem EX, I thought the card was terrible. When I read it a second time, I thought it was bad. When I read it a third time, I wasn't wearing pants. 50 damage for a single energy on a stage 2 is absolutely horrible, and 180 damage for 3 energy is laughable, but the card does grow on you once you realize the potential combo. Even though Cheryl has a knack for showing up in my starting hand when I have to play research, the strategy here relies on her. Attaching a Rock Chestplate to Golem EX and using Lake Acuity effectively gives it 380 hit points. Unless your opponent is hitting Golem for weakness, odds are it's surviving a hit. And since it can attack for a single energy, when you heal off all the damage with Cheryl, discarding the attached energy as a result, it's super easy to power it back up. Golem's first attack, Dynamic Roll, does a measly 50 damage, but the following turn, all of Golem's attacks deal an extra 120 damage. So if you heal it with Cheryl, Dynamic Roll is dealing 170 damage the next turn. Or if you decide to attach a double turbo energy to Golem, Rock Blaster does 280 damage. This is very much a rogue deck with a fairly linear strategy, but at least you'll be able to demolish Miraidon decks with ease. This one's for all the boomers out there. For a single lightning energy, Electrode's Bang Boom Chain does 20 damage plus 40 more for each tool card you discard from your Pokemon. Combo this with the new Snorlax, which brings back 2 leftovers from your discard pile each turn, and you have a deck that exists. Honestly, this should be a fun one to play. Even if you just discard the 4 leftovers each turn, Electrode is still dealing 180 damage for 1 energy. But you play other tools like Experience Share and Forest Sealstone, so getting a one-hit KO on a V or an EX isn't too far-fetched. And late in the game, you can use Rotom V-Star as your attacker, which does 80 damage plus 40 more for each tool card you send to the Lost Zone from your discard pile. You'll have to be ultra careful about your resources and use math more than a normal person should, but Rotom V-Star has been a deck that got some wins in the past, and the Electrode should help give it a boost. Now we enter a place travelers fear to go. Inside me. Well, inside my mind. When Japanese sites only report good winning decks, it's tough to find lists for road decks that aren't good and don't win. So that means the socks are off and I'm left to my own devices. And I've learned that whacking off can produce some terrible things. Case in point, Beedrill. If you have no cards in your hand, Beedrill does 150 damage while also paralyzing and poisoning. This is extremely powerful if you can pull it off, since decks not named Lost Box rarely play more than 2 or 3 switch cards. There are, however, several issues with Beedrill. While Paralysis is the strongest status condition in the game, just like with Tapu Koko VMAX, you do eventually have to take a knockout. And when you do, they'll be able to attack on their next turn. Second, Beedrill is a stage 2. So unlike, say, Hisuian Arcanine, which is a stage 1 and gets to a 0-card hand fairly easily and attacks for free, Beedrill has to rely on Rare Candy at some point to get into play, as well as Reversal Energy or Double Turbo to attack. We have plenty of cards in Standard to easily get a 0-card hand, which means the tough part is looping Beedrill. Admittedly, it's going to take a lot of testing to get Beedrill right. The list I'm showing here relies on Mew to get items out of the deck, Radiant Venusaur to draw you to 4 cards at the end of each turn, and plenty of cards designed to get your hand down to nothing. Because you'll likely be forcing your opponent to use all of their switch cards throughout the game, Mawile can trap someone in the active while you either deck them out or set up your board. There's also one copy of the Chilling Rain Beedrill because you can take a one-shot KO against anything with a special energy attached. Regardless of how good or bad Beedrill is, I predict that both Little Dark Fury and For the Win will make videos on it, and both of their mouths will be open in the thumbnails. I'll finish myself off with Venusaur EX, which has been overshadowed by Blastoise and Charizard, mostly because it isn't very good. For 3 energy, Venusaur EX does 150 damage while also confusing and poisoning your opponent. Getting the energy on Venusaur is probably the biggest obstacle. I could have gone with something like Cherrim, but you have to attach to the Bulbasaur or Ivysaur before evolving into Venusaur, since Cherrim can't accelerate to Pokemon with a rule box. So instead, I'll be playing with a card known to drive even the sanest people mad. Gardenia's Vigor. Welder if it sucked, Gardenia draws you 2 cards, then you can attach up to 2 grass energy from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon. It's underwhelming and has that annoying caveat of only attaching to a bench Pokemon, but 151 does introduce a potential saving grace. Big Balloon. Floatstone for stage 2 Pokemon, Big Balloon removes the retreat cost of the stage 2 it's attached to. So not only does this help with Gardenia, but you can also use 2 Venusaur EX abilities per turn, healing 120 damage in the process. There's 3 Radiant Pokemon that all have some synergy with Venusaur. Serena heals 20 damage from all of your Pokemon, Sneasler boosts the damage Poison deals, and Greninja discards an energy and draws 2 cards. For this build, I went with Greninja to draw the extra cards. Elsewhere, Bibarel is for drawing, Rare Candy is for evolving, and everything else is designed to get Venusaur up and running as soon as possible. There's no optimal Bulbasaur or Ivysaur, so I just stuck with the ones from Pokemon Go. Just like with Beedrill, Venusaur EX will require some testing to learn how bad it truly is. But you could try something like the Eldegoss that puts energy into your hand, which makes using Gardenia that much easier. I know there's several cards not featured in this video, but my brain can only handle so much before I get distracted by my feet. I skipped Raticate because that requires math, Chansey because I already featured enough coin flips, Weezing because Cursula never worked for me, and Onyx because there's no way to search by retreat cost in Pokemon TCG Live. There's a lot of wacky cards coming in 151, so if you have any zany ideas for new decks, let everyone know in the comments. And who knows, if it tickles my feet enough, I might play it on stream.